It's the Happy Families podcast. It's the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now.
When kids are in those primary school years, it seems that the move has some cognitive impact. That is, the kids' thinking, their learning, their ability to concentrate in class, adapt to the new environment, continue with their educational attainment, it can be affected.
And now here's the stars of our show, my mum and dad.
Well, we haven't tried this before. I've been kicked out of the office. We can't record a podcast in the office because there's a new roof apparently going on the building, which has meant that I'm not allowed to be there. And we're trying to record a podcast at home with kids, TVs, washing machines, and who knows what else.
Lucky there's no dogs.
Right. There might be whippersnippers or building stuff happening nearby. Who knows? It could all go pear-shaped. Today on the Happy Families podcast, a conversation in response to a question we had from Powell. Powell asked the question, it looks like you've recently moved. I would like to hear on your podcast, how did you deal with such a significant disruption? New school, new friends, new everything. And does the age of kids play any role here? Powell, thank you so much for your question. You can ask your questions via podcasts at happyfamilies.com.au. Podcasts at happyfamilies.com.au. Kylie, where do you reckon we should start here? You were a child when you moved. You moved from New Zealand to, did I say that right?
New Zealand.
Yeah, that's what I said. New Zealand. Was that your stomach?
That was my stomach. I'm sorry.
I mentioned New Zealand and your stomach starts rumbling when you think of the, what do they call it, the kai? You want to have a honey? Going to get the fish heads cooking
and
boil?
ice cream.
Right.
You say New Zealand and I want ice cream.
You moved from New Zealand to Australia when you were 10. Mm-hmm. Is that about right?
Yep.
And then you were stable though. In New Zealand you were stable and in Australia you were stable. Before we talk about research and before we sort of dive into what our experience has been with our children and respond to Powell's question, what would you say that experience was like for you? What are the learnings that come from that for you?
I struggled desperately as a 10-year-old, 11-year-old coming to a new country. So New Zealand and Australia, there's not a huge amount of cultural difference in comparison to other countries.
Yeah, so like if you move to Asia or something like that, you're going to notice that.
Yeah, but I grew up in a very Polynesian family.
Right.
My mum's Maori, my dad's Australian. And so all of her family are Polynesian and I lived that life. I spent time with the relatives on the Marae and I definitely didn't eat all of their food, but
right.
I was exposed to a very different lifestyle.
So it was a big cultural shift as well as
it really was. And
country.
So coming here and feeling I'm going to say the coldness of Australia comparatively to the emotional availability that Polynesians are for one another,
right,
was really, really hard. And I struggled with friendships. I struggled with even education. Australia and New Zealand were on totally different pages. And so when I showed up, I felt I was very, very far behind.
Yeah.
And it took me, I'm going to say, a good 5 years before I even could accept that this was now where I live.
How did you feel about the move? Like, were you excited? Were you like, yeah, we're going to have a new adventure in a new country? Or was there some hesitation, some reluctance to move on your part?
I was devastated.
Right. So that's got to play a part in it, right? When the kids are excited about the move, that would have to change the overall experience that they have to some
We were moving
degree.
to a place outside of my grandparents. I knew no one.
Yeah.
I had no friends. I'd come from a massive family of cousins. Every holidays we got together. We had family reunions once a year at Christmas time at my great-grandparents' house. There were traditions and, connections that I would never see again as a result of the move here.
So to underscore this, I mean, this really does answer, consistent with what research says, it answers Powell's question, and that is that the bigger the move in terms of shifting schools, shifting geographical locations, you've changed climate enormously, moving from Auckland to Brisbane. There's also the cultural shift, which is phenomenal, but that social connectivity that you've had completely removed from your life.
My best friend lived right next door.
Right.
We had a little trail. We didn't have a fence between our yards. All of those things played such a significant role into how I felt as I kind of came into this new place.
So if you were to spin that around, like my experience, so I lived in the same house in Niagara Park on the New South Wales Central Coast until I was in grade 6. We moved from Niagara Park across to Erina. And I went from Niagara Park Public School to Erina West, which is now I think called Woodport Public School. And when I went there, we were so excited, because we were moving so much closer to the beach. Erina is only 5 k's from the beach, whereas Niagara Park's like a 30-minute drive. And we were moving into a really big house. It was super duper awesome. And I kind of didn't mind that I was saying goodbye to all of my friends because the adventure in front of us seemed so exciting. In retrospect, I miss Chris White and Andy Lucas and Jason Huxley. And I mean, I could just keep on naming all the guys, Brett Morris and Ryan Hall. I can still remember all of my buddies from Niagara Park Public School, and I haven't talked to any of them since grade 5, grade 6 when I left. But I remember them because those relationships were so foundational to my life at that time. It's so deeply enmeshed in me that I'm sort of surprising myself that I can remember. When I got to Erina West, I made friends pretty quickly, but it just wasn't the same. And I knew I was only going to be there for, I think it was 9 months. And then I had to go to a new high school. Changing schools was the hardest thing. And I was in the same high school from 7 to 12, but I never fitted in. I never got it to work. So even though we didn't move house, the shift in school, I think one of the most detrimental things that happened to me during my childhood. It absolutely devastated me. And so even if you're not moving, just shifting your child from one school to another, even for the very best of reasons, sometimes it works, other times it's disastrous. And my experience with the school that my parents put me into, it was a fairly posh private school on the New South Wales Central Coast. That was devastating for me, and it has had lifelong ramifications. I made a couple of friends, a couple of girls who were friends that I've stayed in reasonable contact with even up until today, but it was just awful. I don't have any contact with anybody from the school. It was super, super hard. So that's your experience and my experience. You know what's curious to me, though, is the popular opinion when it comes to moving house. What do most parents say?
Everybody says it to me all the time. Oh, kids are resilient. They'll get over it.
Yeah, they'll be fine. They'll be fine. So we've moved with children a number of times, but there are 3 big moves that our family has done. The first one was monumental. It was massive. So we had a daughter who was in grade 1, I think, grade 2 perhaps, Chanel. We moved from Brisbane all the way down to Wollongong so that I could pursue my postgraduate studies. And watching that happen for her and her little sister Abby, who was just going into her first year of school, that was really surprisingly hard for such little kids. We were shocked by how poorly they responded. But we stayed in Wollongong for 9 years. We created a community. It was an amazing experience, one of the best experiences of our lives, and we just loved the whole Illawarra area. Fell in love with the place, fell in love with the people. It was wonderful. But our second move, 9 years later, up to Brisbane for very, very strong, very, very good reasons, and we don't regret the move. But my goodness, the toll that it took on now 6 children is
not to mention you and I.
Yeah, it's really hard to sort of look back and go, gee, that was hard, especially the kids in their teens. We had a child who was 14, 15. That she was the one who really struggled when she went into her first year of school down in Wollongong. That was super hard, crazy hard. She didn't forgive us for a long, long time. And then the younger kids, they had mixed reactions, but it was generally hard. And then the third big one, was just this year when we moved to the Sunshine Coast from Brisbane. And that's been mostly good, but surprisingly hard for child number 4, who is now 15, that age group again. The other kids have actually adapted pretty well. It hasn't been smooth sailing, but it's been okay. I wouldn't say it's been great, but it's been okay. And over time, we're now starting to see some settling in and some general improvement, but it's been a tough year for them.
So what does the research say? We've obviously shared our experiences, but what's research telling us?
The research, now remember, this is about averages, right? All of the psychological research is about averages. So just because it happens on average doesn't mean it will happen to you. But essentially there's different effects for different ages. Data indicates that younger children are going to be less impacted than older children. They do seem to adapt a little bit easier. But what I find quite curious is that if your kids are between birth and that first year of school, birth and kinder or reception or prep or whatever you call it in your state. Some data suggests that there can be impeded social, emotional outcomes. That is, they struggle a bit socially. Their emotions become a little bit more dysregulated. It takes them a bit to get over that. But their cognitive function, once they're in school, there's no real impact at all. They seem to be just fine. Whereas when kids are in those primary school years, it seems that the move has some cognitive impact. That is, that kids' thinking, their learning, their ability to concentrate in class, adapt to the new environment, continue with their educational attainment, it can be affected. It's fairly minimally, but it can be affected. And obviously there's still that ongoing issue with friends. You described it, I described it, we've watched it with our own kids, and it seems to be pretty much universal. It's a really hard thing for kids to move and to have that really substantial shift. The other thing that the research tells us is that the more you move, the more those moves add up towards negative impacts on our kids' functioning, whether it's executive functioning, whether it's cognitive function, whether it's social emotional functioning, regardless of what it is, there's an impact on well-being, impact on relationships, impact on schooling. We want to keep those moves to a minimum. And the research also seems to suggest that academic effects of moving are felt pretty much straight away, but they largely fade over the course of a couple of years as the kids get settled, as their relationships develop. Schooling, cognitive stuff, learning, academics, that all starts, all the negative effects of the move typically fade within a couple of years.
As we've watched each of our kids go through this at different stages of their lives and at different ages, what has really stood out to me is just their cognitive processing and the way in which some of our kids have chosen to embrace the change and the adventure of the experience while others have resisted it. And it has probably no surprise that the kids with the adventure mindset are the ones that have actually benefited in lots of ways from that move, as opposed to the kid who's been resistant. Mindset
is so important, and helping the kids to be in that mindset. I remember we were sitting in the car, we had 3 kids that were whinging and whining and pretty much crying and saying, this is the worst thing ever, I can't believe we did it. That was when we moved from Wollongong to Brisbane. And one of our kids said, well, I'm actually thinking that this is a great opportunity for us to meet new people and to discover new places and to have new experiences. And I'm deciding right now that this is going to be a really good experience, and I'm just going to put my heart into it and make it work. I mean, they're my words, not hers, but that was essentially the mindset. And you and I have looked at each other in the car and gone, hell yeah. Now, can the rest of the kids catch it? And they didn't. That emotion that she felt didn't catch on, that mindset. It didn't permeate the whole family as much as we tried to emphasize and encourage it. And the kids just had to kind of work through their stuff.
And looking back on that experience and watching that particular child, she didn't have an easy go of it. She had some really, really significant challenges that she was met with along the time that we were there.
Yeah, too right, yeah.
But again, just that constant desire to find the positive and to find ways that she could learn and grow through the process as opposed to having it hold her back were paramount to her being able to move forward.
So, Powell, I hope that answers the question. The research would indicate that it's disruptive. It can lead to pretty small effects, but it can lead to some small levels of dysfunction. They usually fade over time as relationships become embedded, as school becomes part of the new school becomes part of the new routine, and as everyone sort of settles in. But your kids need a lot of support. They definitely need things to look forward to. And the more we can help them to approach this new move with a positive attitude, with a curiosity, my eyes are open and I'm looking forward to opportunities, the more we can do that, the more likely it is that they'll do well, bearing in mind that if you force that too hard, it will backfire. They'll know what you're up to and they'll say, no, I'm going to dig my heels in and make this miserable for everyone. So we want to tread carefully and give them as much autonomy around this as we possibly can.
So maybe we could share some of the things that we've done over the years with those big moves that have helped our children and ourselves to assimilate into a new community and to start to move forward in positive ways.
Okay, let's hit it nice and quick.
So the thing that stands out to me, top of the list, is you have to be intentional. As a parent, you actually can't take a step back and just say the kids will work it out. You actually have to get in there and start to help them know how to build the relationships, these new relationships. Depending on how long they've stayed in the one place, starting again can be really, really daunting. And so as a parent, it's really important that they see you doing those things, making new relationships, taking the steps to do it, but also providing them with opportunities to do it as well. So a couple of things that we've done, we've talked about the neighbourhood breakfast that we had just recently. We've done that a few times in a few different communities. And it's really good for you as a parent to get to know the parents of the kids in the street. So your kid's going to end up in somebody's house at some point. But it's also just for your kids to watch you as you initiate conversations and, kind of have that time to build those relationships. One of the other things that I love doing is just having like activity days during the holidays with the kids. Hold a party for no reason at all. So whether it's a craft party or a pool party or pizza and movies, it's just an opportunity to have families come into your home and, the kids to hang out. What we did this time round is actually delayed the birthday party. Part of the reason was because we didn't have a house. We were homeless.
We talked about that the other week. We had the party 6 months late.
But it made all the difference because we weren't inviting just random kids. We were inviting their friends. They've had 3 terms to build relationships, and it actually made all the difference. And the other thing that we've done, we invite families over. Let's just start getting to know people. You don't know who's going to be your friend unless you actually spend time together. Yep. And those relationships take time. So again, bringing people, you've got a kid, my daughter's age, let's have you over. Let's just get together and, kind of see where it goes. You might not ever be best friends, but it's actually just about starting the process.
Build community. That's really at the heart of it. And be there for your kids. Like you said, really listen and don't dismiss their disappointment, their sadness, their struggles throughout the move. We really hope that this has been helpful for anyone who's in the process of moving, thinking about moving, or knowing that a move is impending. The Happy Families podcast is produced by Justin Ruan from Bridge Media. Craig Bruce is our executive producer. Tomorrow, an important conversation about transitioning to high school, because there's a whole lot of people who are about to go through that, and as I mentioned earlier, it wasn't real good for me. On Thursday, the doctor's desk. Can't wait to get into some studies. It's all happening this week on the Happy Families podcast. For more information, visit us at happyfamilies.com.au.